Christopher Walken's life in show business is a remarkable tapestry of dedication, daring choices, and occasional controversy. Born Ronald Walken on March 31, 1943, in Astoria, Queens, he grew up in a vibrant New York community where creative expression was encouraged from a young age. His mother, Rosalie, harbored dreams of performing on her own, and she transferred that fascination with theater and film to her children. Little Ronald, who would eventually embrace the name Christopher, saw television as a window into a world of dance numbers and sketches that combined glamour with unpredictability. Even as a child, he understood that performing was not just about delivering lines, it was about capturing the pulse of an audience, whether in a small local theater or a large television studio. That early awakening led to his first experiences in show business when he was barely old enough to attend school. Through a series of lucky breaks, determined parents, and a bit of that innate spark, he found himself performing on television and variety shows, honing his presence in front of the camera. That experience left an indelible mark, shaping his comfort with audiences and forming the foundation for an unorthodox trajectory that would see him transform from a young dancer and stage actor into an Oscar-winning performer whose name came to symbolize unpredictability. By the time Ronald Walken rebranded himself as Christopher, he had amassed experience in theater, television, and most importantly in dance, a discipline that instilled in him a unique physical awareness he would later channel into countless iconic roles. That sense of movement became essential, especially as he navigated projects that spanned genres, from psychological thrillers to broad comedies, from gritty underworld dramas to flamboyant musicals. It's precisely this fusion of technical skill, bold artistic choices, and a willingness to swim against the current of expectation that propelled Walken to stardom. He would drop out of Hofstra University to pursue acting more directly, following the momentum he had built as a teenager in off-Broadway productions. The stage, with its immediacy and potential for improvisation, offered him a playground in which he could cultivate the intense, often disconcerting energy that later became his signature on film. While many young actors aspired to the mainstream or the matinee idol route, Walken found himself drawn to offbeat roles that demanded emotional risk. Here was an individual who found beauty in the strange, who saw promise in scripts that teetered on the edge of dark storytelling. New York's theater community in the 1960s was a hub of experimentation, and Walken immersed himself fully. He appeared in musicals, occasionally showcasing tap and jazz dance he had learned as a boy, but also ventured into more dramatic works that drew on the method tradition. Observers from that time remember the quiet aura he brought into rehearsals. Half the time, he would be reserved, introspective, and careful with his words, but the other half, he would erupt in an almost manic display of creativity, switching tones and intentions in a heartbeat. That unpredictability, in a realm that often values consistency above all else, distinguished him from peers who adhered to standard interpretations. Walken's first exposure to film audiences happened incrementally, with small appearances that garnered modest notice from critics who saw, if only briefly, that peculiar spark. He moved from cameo roles into slightly bigger supporting parts, but it was 1977's Annie Hall that provided him a small but striking showcase. He played Dwayne Hall, the rather unsettling brother of Diane Keaton's titular character, in a short scene that combined dark comedy with psychological tension. Woody Allen's film was already rife with comedic genius, yet when Walken appeared, something shifted. The audience sensed the off-kilter quality he exuded, his measured speech, the eerie calm, the carefully timed silences. Although it was a tiny role, it left an outsized impression. That performance foreshadowed the unique style that would become crucial to his career in the following decades. A major turning point arrived in 1978 when director Michael Cimino cast him in The Deer Hunter, a Vietnam War drama that boasted a stellar cast, including Robert De Niro and Meryl Streep. Walken portrayed Nick, a character whose innocence and zest for life devolve into trauma, alienation, and near catatonic detachment after harrowing wartime experiences. The now infamous Russian roulette scene remains one of the most tension-filled sequences in cinematic history, and critics lauded Walken's ability to inhabit every moment, no matter how unsettling. He conveyed profound psychological wounds through subtle, trance-like expressions, the occasional outburst of despair, and an authenticity that made viewers deeply uncomfortable, yet empathetic. For this performance, he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, firmly planting him in the public consciousness. Suddenly, Christopher Walken was no longer a marginal character actor with an odd charisma. He was an Oscar winner whose choices merited attention. This allowed him to accelerate his pursuit of unconventional roles, forging a path that deliberately steered clear of the conventional hero or romantic lead. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, Walken proved his capacity to interpret disturbed, morally ambiguous, or downright villainous figures. Filmmakers recognized a kind of mesmerizing darkness in him. He was not a brute who relied on physical intimidation alone. Rather, his power resided in the coiled tension he radiated. Audiences could never be sure if he would remain still and thoughtful or erupt into terrifying action. In David Cronenberg's 1983 adaptation of Stephen King's The Dead Zone, he portrayed a man who wakes from a coma to find he has psychic abilities. The performance was layered with anguish and moral quandaries. Could he prevent cataclysmic events he foresaw? Or was he cursed to watch tragedy unfold? Walken's interpretation retained a quiet sorrow that kept the supernatural story grounded. Critics further acknowledged that deep under those haunted eyes was an actor capable of stretching empathy in surprising ways, shifting seamlessly between softness and cruelty. Just as his career flourished with each new challenging role, however, Walken found himself entangled in one of Hollywood's lingering scandals. In November 1981, actress Natalie Wood drowned under mysterious circumstances during a yacht trip near Catalina Island. The yacht's occupants included Wood's husband, Robert Wagner, the ship's captain, and Christopher Walken, who was at the time filming Brainstorm with Wood. While Walken was never formally charged or even designated a suspect in her death, speculation emerged due to the baffling nature of the tragedy. Stories swirled about that night, some tabloids suggesting a quarrel or a romantic entanglement, others positing a simple accident. Walken consistently maintained that he had gone to bed, only to awaken later to learn that Wood was missing. Despite the official ruling that Wood's death was an accident, rumors abounded and continue to do so, occasionally reignited by media outlets or alleged new evidence. Walken has steadfastly refused to sensationalize the incident, limiting his remarks to expressions of grief over the loss of his friend and co-star. Still, the public imagination latched onto the scenario of an iconic actress drowning with Christopher Walken present, fueling endless speculation and theories. Though the scandal momentarily threatened to overshadow his escalating career achievements, his involvement was never deemed criminal, and he emerged from that dark episode having cooperated with authorities yet opting not to dwell on it publicly. By the mid-1980s, his professional momentum was unstoppable. He demonstrated his flair for villainy in 1985's A View to a Kill, playing the Bond adversary Max Zorin. Eccentric, cunning, and merciless, the character was an ideal match for Walken's capacity to give moral depravity an oddly mesmerizing veneer. Whether brandishing a machine gun or delivering lines with that odd rhythmic hesitation, he carved out a new standard for Bond villains, distinct from the cartoonish antagonists of earlier eras. Some found him too outré, but many were captivated. Walken's approach elevated the film's tension, once again showcasing his capacity to morph comedic undertones into something truly menacing. Never content to rest on a single type of character, Walken branched out into other roles that demanded complexity. For instance, At Close Range in 1986 saw him adopt the persona of a manipulative father figure, engaging in a power dynamic with Sean Penn's character that was both paternal and chilling. In each project, he magnified the emotional stakes, somehow managing to make darkness sympathetic or at least compelling enough to watch unblinkingly. The transition to the 1990s brought about more iconic work. In the 1990s, The Comfort of Strangers, directed by Paul Schrader, he inhabited a cryptic presence in Venice, adding another layer of creepiness to his portfolio. Abel Ferrara's King of New York that same year gave him one of his most memorable roles. Frank White, a crime lord who emerges from prison with altruistic ambitions that clash head-on with his ruthless methods. As Frank White, Walken unleashed a mesmerizing combination of sensitivity, unpredictability, and violence. Even critics who disliked the film acknowledged the enthralling performance he delivered. Notably, Ferrara, who cherished boundary-pushing talent, found in Walken an actor who would commit fully to the moral ambiguity of a gangster who kills without remorse, yet invests in the city's welfare. Walken's capacity to make the audience question whether to root for or against Frank White underscores his skill at blending intimidation with an odd sense of humanity. Yet controversies never seemed too far behind. Despite his critically acclaimed performances, gossip columnists often circled back to the Natalie Wood incident. Detectives reopened the case decades later, reclassifying the cause of death and prompting fresh questions about that ill-fated voyage. Walken consistently maintained his stance, cooperating when asked, but refusing to indulge in speculative interviews that fanned the flames of rumor. He handled inquisitive journalists by reiterating official findings or offering a polite deflection, emphasizing that the real tragedy was the loss of Wood's life. The public and the press, for their part, vacillated between fascination with the potential scandal and admiration for Walken's newest performances. Meanwhile, he secured roles that tested his comedic timing, such as his cameo in Pulp Fiction, 1994, which Quentin Tarantino wrote specifically to showcase Walken's unique voice and ability to hold an audience captive. The monologue about the gold watch epitomizes how Walken could transform even the quirkiest scene into something unforgettable, leaving viewers slightly on edge but thoroughly entertained. Walken navigated the 1990s with impressive dexterity, balancing mainstream ventures with indie films, never hesitating to go for scripts that offered novelty or strangeness. Beyond Tarantino, he worked with Tim Burton, Batman Returns, Sleepy Hollow, Wayne Wang, The Wild Side, and even starred in the Prophecy series as the Archangel Gabriel, delivering an unsettling mix of divine authority and demonic cunning. It became increasingly clear that he relished the outlandish, the morally ambiguous, and the psychologically intense. By the late 90s, he had accrued an almost cult-like following. with fans relishing every comedic cameo, every bizarre cameo on talk shows, and every instance of that trademark halting speech pattern. Some speculated that his unique line deliveries were a conscious stylistic choice to keep the audience guessing, while others believed them to be an inadvertent byproduct of his theatrical background. Even as Christopher Walken soared, questions about his personal life remained. He was married to casting director Georgianne Walken, whom he met in the late 60s. By most accounts, they lived a quiet life away from the constant paparazzi presence that ensnared other Hollywood personalities. Despite his relative public silence about his private affairs, tabloids occasionally tried to paint him as reclusive or label him an enigma. Interviewers found him genial, even polite, but also elusive. He seldom indulged personal revelations. Instead, he would deliver whimsical musings about dancing, cooking, or his unorthodox childhood. The mystery was magnified by the continued public curiosity over the Natalie Wood tragedy. If Walken felt pressure from this scrutiny, he didn't show it. His approach was a resolute refusal to exploit or sensationalize the tragedy. Over time, that stance produced a begrudging respect among many observers, though some corners of the press insisted on searching for hidden truths. In the early 2000s, Walken's career took a turn toward more commercial fare. He accepted roles in big-budget comedies and family-friendly films, a departure from his earlier concentration on darker, grittier material. One of the highlights was Catch Me If You Can, 2002, directed by Steven Spielberg, where he portrayed Frank Abagnale Sr., the flawed yet endearing father of Leonardo DiCaprio's runaway con artist. His performance, while containing glimpses of heartbreak and disappointment, also revealed a tender dimension that some audiences found surprising. This earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor, proving that even after decades in the industry and after countless sinister or sardonic characters, he could still elicit genuine pathos. That same period showed him cheerfully embracing comedic roles, whether as the eccentric father in Wedding Crashers or the dancing Wilbur Turnblad in the 2007 musical Hairspray. His background in dance surfaced again, delighting audiences who relished the sight of him tapping, twirling, and grinning from ear to ear. These lighter parts demonstrated his adaptability. Far from undermining his image as an intense performer, they expanded it. Now he was not merely the chilling presence with an uncanny stare, but also an actor who could make you laugh simply by walking on screen. His comedic appearances on Saturday Night Live famously led to the enduring More Cowbell sketch that remains entrenched in popular culture. Through these comedic outings, he further distanced himself from any overshadowing scandal, reinforcing that his talent and range superseded the tabloid curiosity that trailed him. Still, the specter of Natalie Wood's death periodically resurfaced. In 2011, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department chose to reopen the investigation. This development triggered a wave of sensational headlines asking whether new evidence pointed to foul play or a more complex scenario involving the night's participants. Walken responded by cooperating with authorities, yet remained loyal to the official story, that Wood's death was a tragic accident. He was asleep when she went missing, and he had nothing to add that could change the initial conclusions. Reporters and online commentators spun new theories, dissecting the timeline and reinterpreting ambiguous statements from the past. Yet no charges were filed against anyone. In interviews, Walken remained calm, neither defensive nor particularly emotive, offering minimal commentary. Some found that reticence suspicious, while others considered it dignified, especially given the decades that had elapsed. The incident, though sensational, failed to hamper the momentum of his career. Directors continued to cast him, trusting that his name brought a distinctive gravity and flair. His willingness to take risks manifested in a wide range of films through the mid to late 2000s. Seven Psychopaths, The Rundown, Click, and more. He dropped in for cameos, big or small, that often became the talk of the film. Despite the comedic forays, he never entirely abandoned his darker inclinations. He accepted roles where he could subvert expectations, portraying flawed mentors, quirky antagonists, or paternal figures caught in moral dilemmas. When asked about how he sustained such a prolific output, he credited his early discipline in dance and theater, explaining that he approached acting as a craft that demanded continuous practice, respect, and open-mindedness. He treated each role, from cameo to lead, with the same thorough study, reading entire scripts repeatedly until he could sense the story's rhythms. This approach, he believed, allowed him to adapt if directors wanted to experiment on set, or if a scene required improvisation. He relished being kept on his toes, for it reminded him of the ephemeral nature of live theater. All the while, the industry's reverence for his unique presence grew. Many younger actors considered him a legend, sometimes confessing that sharing a scene with Christopher Walken felt both intimidating and exhilarating. The rumor mill occasionally whispered about eccentric on-set behaviors, strange conversation topics, peculiar warm-up routines, or unexpected bouts of dancing. But these anecdotes only increased his mystique. Most of his co-stars described him as courteous, ultra-prepared, and committed to making a scene crackle with energy, even if it meant trying unconventional line readings or encouraging a co-star to explore new emotional depths. If directors found it challenging to harness that unpredictability, they also realized it was exactly why audiences were enthralled by him. The possibility that he might pivot from deadpan seriousness to explosive intensity in the blink of an eye captured viewers' imaginations time and time again. Toward the end of the 2000s, Walken continued weaving between comedic and dramatic roles. He participated in Balls of Fury, a ping-pong comedy featuring him in flamboyant attire, and also in Illuminata, a romantic drama directed by John Turturro, where he offered an understated, haunting performance. This variety underscored a career that refused to stagnate. Nevertheless, the question of scandal never fully disappeared. Occasional talk show hosts or tabloid reporters would broach the subject of Wood's drowning, trying to pry details from him, hoping for sensational sound bites. He maintained a stance of regretful brevity, reiterating that all relevant details had been shared with the authorities and that further speculation served no purpose except to revisit a painful event. His approach infuriated some who believed there had to be more to the story, while others admired his refusal to let a tragic event become a media circus. As the 2010s arrived, Walken ventured into productions that took advantage of streaming platforms and art house circuits. He made cameo appearances, lent his distinctive voice to animated works, and returned to the stage occasionally, reminding audiences that his foundation was in live performance. Even if some roles seemed smaller or more niche, he tackled them with the same commitment. He'd play a recluse, a charming con man, or a surreal presence bridging reality and fantasy. A consistent element was his abiding sense of play, always leaving room for spontaneity, always looking for that moment that might shock the audience out of complacency. While critics sometimes argued that the modern industry wasn't fully tapping into his potential, fans cherished every morsel he offered. His slightest smirk or a pause at an odd moment could steal an entire scene, overshadowing other actors in the process. Despite the breadth of his filmography, The scandal questions never fully abated. Now and then, a new wave of true crime interest latched onto Natalie Wood's case, re-examining the timeline or reading into testimonies from years past. Each iteration sparked fleeting interest in whether Walken might finally break his silence or if new allegations would surface implicating him or anyone else on that boat. Time and again, these theories fizzled out, either due to lack of evidence or Walken's steadfast refusal to engage. His actions suggested that he believed the best tribute to Wood was to preserve her memory without indulging in sensational speculation. Yet there was an inescapable reality. Every time the case resurfaced in the media, his name attached to it once more, reminding the public that no matter how many beloved roles he delivered, a corner of his public persona remained tied to that night off the coast of California. One might suspect that such an enduring, unresolved scandal could sour an actor's prospects. Yet Walken's popularity persisted. Part of this was undoubtedly due to the sheer versatility of his performances, but it also stemmed from a sense that he was a creative force who transcended simplistic moral categories. Fans saw him as an artist who, while having witnessed a tragedy, never exploited it for attention or sympathy. Instead, he kept refining his craft, diving headlong into scripts that range from the comedic to the macabre. His comedic stints on Saturday Night Live continued to amuse new audiences, with the more cowbell sketch rising to a near mythic status in internet culture. The comedic persona displayed in these sketches only made him more enigmatic, if that was even possible, because he would pivot from comedic buffoonery to playing, say, a ruthless gangster in another movie with astonishing ease. In interviews throughout the 2010s, when asked about how he felt regarding the persistent association with the scandal, Walken kept his comments measured. He would gently shift the conversation back to his work, to the challenges and joys of collaborating with a range of directors, or to the subtle differences between performing on stage versus film. He noted that acting, for him, was akin to an ongoing dance. You memorize your moves, but you leave enough openness to adapt to the music of the moment. If he harbored any frustration about the case overshadowing certain aspects of his career, he rarely expressed it publicly. Observers sometimes criticized him for not giving direct answers, but others commended him for maintaining dignity in the face of an event that, at its core, was a heartbreak for many. Meanwhile, the industry recognized Christopher Walken as a dependable name that could add intellectual heft or comedic sparkle to almost any production. Some younger filmmakers cast him in cameo roles just for the pleasure of seeing him interpret their dialogue with that mesmerizing cadence. Others admired him so deeply they wrote roles specifically with him in mind, imagining the lines in that voice even before the screenplay was complete. Through each new collaboration, he found ways to surprise, occasionally unleashing those famous dance moves or leaning hard into comedic territory. It reached a point where the Christopher Walken cameo became a pop cultural event in itself. As the years rolled on, the chatter around the scandal occasionally spiked, often triggered by an anniversary of Natalie Wood's passing or a tabloid's claim to have uncovered new details. Through it all, Walken rarely strayed from his script. It was a tragedy, an accident, and any further speculation was fruitless. Some fans believed that perhaps he had spoken more candidly behind closed doors, confiding in close friends or family, but the public never got a glimpse of that. Despite the murkiness, directors and producers showed no hesitation in hiring him for major roles, guest appearances, or even cameo bits in commercials and music videos. His comedic collaboration with Fatboy Slim in the music video Weapon of Choice where he danced throughout a deserted hotel lobby, became a viral sensation, further highlighting how his early dance training kept shining through. That piece of performance art showcased an actor in his late 50s, still moving with balletic elegance, a testament to discipline and longevity. Throughout the second half of the 2010s and into the 2020s, Walken continued to select parts that aligned with his preference for variety. Whether he was anchoring smaller indie projects that allowed him room for deep character work or popping up in big commercial releases to provide a dash of unpredictability, he seemed content with a career that defied a single narrative. He returned to television in limited series form, exploring arcs that gave him fresh challenges. The film landscape had changed dramatically since his early days. Streaming services now vied with cinemas for audience attention, but Walken moved fluidly within this environment, occasionally reflecting on his longtime motto that any setting could be a stage if approached with creativity. Inevitably, as he accepted new roles and offered new interviews, certain outlets took the chance to revisit the yacht incident, speculating about whether modern forensics could shine a new light on the case. The quiet consistency of Walken's stance rendered such speculation somewhat circular, yet it never fully died. Some critics argued that the controversy had been reduced to a footnote by that point, overshadowed by the actor's wide-ranging repertoire. Others insisted it remained a crucial mystery that had never been adequately resolved. Walken himself stood in the crosshairs of that debate, yet rarely seemed unsettled by it. He continued to speak in measured tones, refusing to pour gasoline on a fire that, from his perspective, only brought renewed sorrow for everyone involved. Beyond the scandal, his fans zeroed in on the tapestry of his work. They relished recounting the multifaceted roles he embodied: a traumatized Vietnam veteran in The Deer Hunter, a father teetering on the edge of heartbreak in Catch Me If You Can, a flamboyant comedic presence in Wedding Crashers, and a ruthless gangster in King of New York. While he occasionally revisited stage performances to stay true to his theatrical roots, he never neglected film, the medium that made him a household name. Indeed, throughout each role, glimpses of his dancer's grace remained. An unexpected pivot during a dramatic line, a small shuffle of the feet in a comedic scene. It was his unspoken signature, a gift from those early days when he learned to trust his body's instinct to communicate emotion without words. In a sense, the scandal ultimately became an odd backdrop, a murmur at the edges of a storied career rather than the defining event. Many speculate that had Walken acted differently, either indulging the media's fascination or publicly feuding with Robert Wagner, the outcome of public perception might have changed. But in reality, he chose a path of near silence, letting official investigations speak for themselves. That approach might have left some questions unanswered, but it safeguarded his focus on the craft of acting. Directors, producers, fellow actors, and fans appreciated the unwavering commitment to performance, no matter what rumors roiled beyond the set. And so, Christopher Walken endured, known for a persona that blended comedic unpredictability, chilling dramatic power, and an undercurrent of unwavering professionalism. If the scandal tested him, he passed by doubling down on his dedication to the art. As you reflect on Christopher Walken's many accomplishments, it becomes clear that his career arc, from precocious child performer to an enduring film presence, is defined by adventurous role choices and an unshakable confidence in his own style. While the specter of Natalie Wood's drowning never fully dissipated, neither did it obliterate the momentum of his artistry. For fans, the unwavering fascination with the scandal lingers, but so does the awe inspired by the man's capacity to portray heartbreak, terror, and absurdity with equal flair. Though controversies come and go in Hollywood, few actors manage to maintain a balance between privacy and public intrigue so effectively as Christopher Walken. And perhaps that in itself is an unspoken testament to his mastery, both on and off the screen. He has guided his image through rough waters, letting the work speak louder than any rumors. His filmography, brimming with menacing glances, comedic brilliance, and the occasional dance step, stands as a chronicle of an artist who continually embraces challenge, invites a bit of chaos, and emerges unscathed